Welcome into the Big City Sports Podcast. We have another episode coming up, and today you can probably see I do not have the microphone in front of my face. I got something clipped onto my shirt today because I do know the audio has not been the best on these last few episodes. But today we're going to be talking baseball. A lot of things going on. The Yankees-White Sox series was good. The Yankees got a sweep against the Red Sox. We'll get into that a little bit later. The Mets have been struggling. They have a tough schedule ahead of them. The Cubs dropped 11 in a row for the second straight time this season. So a lot of bad things happening and a lot of good things happening for the teams we're covering. But before all that, welcome in, Swig. How you doing?
Doing great, man. I'm a little confused by these positive vibes recently. I don't really know what to do with those. Quote Ricky Bobby, what do I do with my hands? Do I just keep them up here? I don't know what to do, man. But no, I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk some baseball. There's been a couple of really good series the last week or so that we can dive into.
There have been, and it's crazy because you look across Major League Baseball and you see a team like the Mets projected to finish high. The Cubs, I think, were projected maybe middle of the pack. They've fallen pretty far down. And then you look at the Yankees team, who was projected to be high. They've been up and down this year. The White Sox have been projected to be good. They have been good this season. So a lot of different things going on with the teams that we're covering. So let's start with the Cubs, who I think have been the most drastic as of what has happened. You did expect a lot of losing after you lose players like basically everyone on the roster on a one-year contract who they dealt at the trade deadline. But you have seen a great season from Rafael Ortega, hitting 325, 6 home runs, starting in center field every day. So there are some positives, but they're getting absolutely pummeled night after night. And I know I'm saying this after 2 straight wins against the Reds, but they lost 11 in a row for the second time this year. So things are not trending up on the north side.
Well, they're still ahead of the Pirates, and Wilson Contreras is still there, so it's not all bad.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it hasn't been great, but there's not really a ton to say about it because this was essentially expected. Maybe you weren't looking to see 2 double-digit losing streaks within 6 weeks of each other. Like, I get that part of it, but we've talked about wanted them to pick a direction, wanted them to trade everybody at the deadline. They did, and I'm sure any rational Cubs fan is going to know the rest of this season's not going to be fun. And they finally broke the losing streak with a couple wins over a Reds team that's trying to chase down a wild card spot. So, hey, if you get to play spoiler a little bit at the end of the season, it's not a total loss, right?
Right. Anytime you could knock out opponents, especially in your division that are trying to get in the playoffs, it's got to be really nice because I mean they've been doing it to the Cubs a couple times. You've seen them play spoiler a little bit, so whenever you can get that sort of revenge, that's what you're looking for. But the silver lining in this, I know I mentioned Ortega. Someone named Frank Schwindel has stepped up for this ball club. He raked in the minor leagues, and he really hasn't had a full shot at bats in the major leagues. He's hitting over 300 with the Cubs, multiple home runs, and he's not the most athletic guy, which is why I don't think that he has any reason why he's gotten the at bats. But right now, he's making the most of his opportunities. And right now, it's just a wait and see approach with this Cubs team, with everyone they're throwing in there just to see who could potentially be on the roster next season.
Yeah, we'll see how sustainable this is from Ortega and Schwindel and everything. But this is kind of the thing where the games themselves are pretty meaningless. You get some young guys or some flyer guys, some at bats. Hopefully, you can pick 1 or 2 or maybe more than that to stick around as key pieces of a future team, or at the very least, start next season with the big club and go from there. But by the way, I feel like this is pod worthy here. We mentioned it. You mentioned it to me a few minutes ago. So Kyle Hendricks is leading the league in wins, huh?
Yes, that is probably the most mind-boggling stat you can think of because it seems like whenever he goes out there, they go to war with him. It doesn't matter. His ERA might be, 380 now, 390, somewhere around there. I mean, he's had up and down stretches this year, but whenever he has bad starts, they usually score a lot of runs. And when he has good starts, they usually don't score a lot of runs, and it really helps him just to settle down out there and be the pitcher that he is. So Kyle Hendricks, that's one bright thing to look at, is he does lead the league in wins with 14. He's has a nice team-controlled contract over the next few seasons, can be a real leader in that rotation for the young kids coming up. And, well, last thing real quick on the Cubs, Adbert Alzolay on the injured list, and they're going to start looking at some younger kids. Justin Steele's made a few starts. Keegan Thompson, who was great out of the bullpen to start his big league career, he's ramped up. He's about 5 innings in AAA right now. He might get the start on Saturday. So young pitchers is probably going to be the key to this rebuild if they want to have any success. because they haven't been able to develop pitching. That's been a weak spot for them for many years. So hopefully they can find a way to get good starts, good production out of these young kids so they can get a rotation spot next season.
It's definitely a big X factor to keep an eye on, but I also think we need to reasonably expect that next year is probably not going to be great either. What I'm
Right.
more curious to see, honestly, is the Cubs' offseason approach in terms of what they're looking for on the trade market, what they're looking for in free agency, how much they're looking to spend, because those decisions in the offseason are going to dictate the direction of this franchise for the next 5 to 10 years, if not longer. I mean, you could make an argument for that. So the rest of this season, at the trade deadline, the Cubs made clear what they're going to do for this year, but the rest of the future is incredibly wide open. So all the options are there. Do you have one that you really want them to take, or do you think it's more be patient for a year or two?
I think the way they're going to go about it is, first of all, the general manager Jed Hoyer popped on ESPN 1000, a Chicago radio station, and said he's not going to make. He doesn't have a plan yet, and he's not going to announce his plan until he knows what the collective bargaining agreement is going to be going forward. So he wants to know the control issues of getting a player locked up. If you could have an extra year of control with service time, all those little gray areas when it comes to expanding the roster and anything like that, to where he can get an advantage. Because I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but if you trade someone with a qualifying offer, if you were to say Chris Bryant stays on the Cubs and they don't trade him, qualifying offer I believe is a second round pick. If that's the case, if he goes to the Giants, he's a first round pick if they qualify and he does not accept. So that was one of the issues, is you're really giving a team that you're trading him to a first round pick in that deal. That's something that he said when you look at the collective bargaining agreement next year, that's going to be something he wants to be mindful of before he starts offering out some contracts or anything that goes about that.
Yeah, and we'll tease this for a couple months down the line, but we can definitely do a huge episode here in the future, dictating a possible, if not likely, MLB lockout for anyone who's not aware. And you mentioned the service time. We could colloquial, I can't say that word, colloquially call it the Chris Bryant rule, because
Yeah.
his service time was pretty clearly manipulated, and I get it. Like, I get why the Cubs did it. I get why Bryant didn't like it, but that's a discussion for another episode. But it's loopholes like that, or arbitration systems, etc. There's a lot of big things that are leading to some major financial disagreements, and that's typically not recipe to play a lot of games. Just ask the NHL.
Yeah. And good job, Cubs, on weighing. Good job using the last year of Chris Bryant's service time. He really fought for in that one. But final thoughts on the Cubs before we get over to the White Sox. They have $40 million owed next season. Obviously, 22 of that's to Jason Hayward. Good job. You robbed the city of Chicago and taking your money with it. But I do think that they have, I think he said about $100 million to spend. So maybe they're going to Alfonso Soriano our asses again and drop a big contract to a Carlos Correa or something like that. I personally don't think that's the way you go. Maybe you bring in some left-handed power because that's a bigger need, but that's going to be a topic for the offseason. They are in a good spot to where I think maybe they go a little bit under 500 next year. I don't think they're going to be piss poor, but I don't think they're going to be a wild card contender by any stretch of the imagination.
Hey, I'm left-handed, and I'll take some steroids. Tell Jed Hoyer to give me the
Yeah,
$100 million.
maybe
I'll
you
do
could
the
pull.
best I can.
Maybe you could pull a Chris Davis, who ended up retiring the other day. But odd topic there. Let's get into the White Sox. They're known for some of the Tony La Russa managed some players with some steroid issues, but that's the only direction we can go with that one. But the White Sox are in an interesting spot. I mean, the starting rotation has been good. Carlos Rodon on the injured list with shoulder issues. I'm pretty sure that's more rest than anything, just fatigue. Um, but the White Sox, they're in a pretty good spot atop their division. I'm pretty sure they're a lock for the playoffs. Lou Bob came back. Luis Robert, he's hitting over 330 with multiple bombs. He's been fantastic. Eloy Jimenez, you saw him in the futures, or not the futures game, the Field of Dreams game, where he really it showed his power. So White Sox in a good spot. Before we get into the Liam Hendriks struggles as of late, what have you seen from this White Sox team?
A lot of the things we expected. And you mentioned them being in an interesting spot. No, they're in the best spot in baseball in terms of being comfortably in the division lead and a lock to make the playoffs and avoid a wild card game. They have that they're in a better position to do that than any other team in the league. Last time I checked the standings, which was earlier today, they were the only team in the division in the AL Central over 500, and they have a 10 or 11 game lead on Cleveland. So I feel like they are in a good shape to win the division there. I will be shocked if anything catastrophic happens there. The bigger questions are just basically good problems to have. Hey, we're so loaded. We have so many qualified options to close all the games that we win. Which one is our best option? Like, I understand it will matter in the playoffs and all, but if that's what you're trying to figure out with 40 games left in the regular season, you are pampered beyond belief.
Yeah, that's true. You're in a great situation there. Craig Kimbrell also available as a club option, I believe it is for 22. So he's going to be sticking around for a while there. But this is an interesting spot. Now, Craig Kimbrell, before he got to the White Sox, was a dominant closer. 0.55 ERA, I believe it was at the time of the trade. Great save total, NL All-Star. Liam Hendriks, AL All-Star, great closer. And he was a big piece of the White Sox success in the first half. Now the trade deadline happens. Craig Kimbrell comes over there. His ERA is above 4 since joining the White Sox. He's given up home runs, and the same with Liam Hendriks. Hendriks' home run totals have leapfrogged. His ERA is now around 3.60. So the ERAs are jumping a little bit from these two closers. Do you think that this could be a concern for them, knowing that they potentially have pressure behind them?
I think it's a mild concern. I think, well, Kimbrell in particular is a Hall of Fame closer here in the future. Hendricks, it's not entirely impossible. He eventually gets there as well. And if both of them are still struggling by the time October rolls around, then yes, that would be a major concern. But the White Sox do have a pretty good amount of depth in that bullpen. You got to like how Garrett Crochet has been pitching. Aaron Bummer is still there. So you add those two to the guys that we're discussing, and there's four options who are at least theoretically capable, I would say, of closing a game or at least getting some high leverage outs in the later innings. And the White Sox also have a very good pitching rotation that should be able to go deeper into games than most of these other teams will expect in the playoffs. And you can push these guys past 100 pitches, 120 pitches, even if you need them to, because there's the extra days off for traveling, and you're only going to need 4 starters instead of 5. So imagine having Keuchel or even Rodon possibly as a weapon out of the bullpen as a long reliever or an extra inning game. I mean, I don't think they really have too much to be concerned about. To get back to your original question, they have so many other options, and I also have faith in both Kimbrell and Hendricks that they're going to straighten it out. And while they might eventually switch the order of which one pitches the 8th and the 9th, I still have enough faith in them. And Hendricks got a 5-out save tonight where he didn't give up a base runner and struck out 3. They have had some struggles. There's no question about that. The White Sox haven't been quite as dominant recently, but these are games, these are tune-up games essentially before the playoffs. They're going to win at least half of them and coast into the playoffs. And the biggest thing is just getting these guys into a rhythm.
Yeah, that's a good point. The White Sox in great shape. You look at the catcher position; they got Yasmani Grandal, who hit a bomb in AAA Charlotte. He looks like he's ready probably by the end of the weekend or early next week. They'll get him back to big league action. But that's wrapping up the White Sox, and we did see Liam Hendriks struggle a little bit in the 9th inning in the Field of Dreams game, in which Tim Anderson would walk it off against the Yankees. But believe it or not, that was the last time the Yankees lost. They're riding a 5-game win streak now. They beat the Boston Red Sox, 6-game win streak, my apology. They had the doubleheader against that they swept on Tuesday. They took game 3 of the series on Wednesday night. The 9th innings haven't been clean by any stretch of the imagination, but the Yankees have found themselves in a nice little rhythm right now.
Yeah, the end of these games are about as dirty as Pigpen from Charlie Brown, but they're getting it they're getting it done just barely, adopting that cardiac. Let's give all Yankees fans heart palpitations for every single 9th inning mentality. But if it gets the Yankees some wins, I'll take it. We got to talk about just the Yankees White Sox series real quick. I think recap it. The Yankees did end up taking 2 out of 3 in that series, winning both games in Chicago. But yeah, man, that Field of Dreams game was fucking painful. I mean, an awesome atmosphere and everything, a cool setting. But the one time that you have a dramatic 9th inning comeback to take the lead, Zach Britton pisses it away five minutes later. I mean, come on, dude.
Yeah, not good at all. Zach Britton, he's had his struggles in the ninth inning, and he's talked to the manager Aaron Boone about it, and Boone still seems happy to send his ass back out there for the ninth. Even when the player says he's not feeling right, he's struggling in that role. He wouldn't put himself out there. Boone's like, I got you. Let's send you back out there to get shelled again. And sure enough, he has been tattooed every single time he has taken the mound. So not a good look for Zach Britton. Not a good look for the Yankees. So I personally think, and I know this is sort of transitioning a little bit here, but I think Jonathan Loizaga has the best stuff in that bullpen, and his ERA is below 3, and he came in and got big outs. And I know he came on the other day, a little bases loaded issue, or not bases loaded. There were 2 on, I believe, in the Boston game, in game 1 of that series. But he threw smoke by him. He has lights out stuff, and that's someone I want in the ninth inning. And I'm not saying go away from Chapman, but I'm saying lefty righty. Maybe you see the matchups a little bit, and maybe you go to a Loizaga in the ninth inning if that's your option right there.
Yeah, look, we can talk about what I would call the four horsemen of the Yankees bullpen if they're healthy right now. Well, one at a time, real quick. So start with Britton, who I understand why he was given first dibs to close games in Chapman's absence, just considering his pedigree and history with it, especially when he was dominant for the Orioles a few seasons back. But he hasn't pitched much this season. And when he has, he's been walking even more guys than he usually does, hasn't been able to get the sinker down. Short version is he hasn't been very good. And you don't really want a guy with an ERA of 6 trying to close games with a 1 or 2 run lead. It's not a great formula, as the Yankees have learned the hard way too many times this season. After he blew the Field of Dreams game, the game on Saturday that went to the 10th inning, the Yankees score 3 runs in the top of the 10th. That's great. Then they bring Britton in after the one day after he specifically says, I shouldn't be closing games right now. Aaron Boone says, hey, well, I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. Here you go in a high leverage situation. He immediately proceeds to load the bases and give up a run. So the tying runs are in scoring position. But Albert Abreu, of all people, did a fantastic job getting out of it to rescue him. And then you'll notice a similar theme in the game on Sunday where the Yankees have a 4-run lead. Litke doesn't have it, and Wandy Peralta has to come in and save the day. It's never easy. It just isn't. After Britton, so because you know we can skip Chapman. We've talked about him a lot, and this is today's Wednesday night that we're recording this. He was activated for today's game. The Yankees did hold on to win it, but they bring Chapman in with a 4-run lead, and he gives up 1 home run and then brings on 2 other base runners to bring the tying run to the plate. And Lucas Litke this time barely able to get out of it, so he needs to get back in rhythm, right? That leaves 2. So you mentioned Loizaga. The other one is Chad Green. They have both had, how do I put this? Loizaga has been our best reliever this season. If I'm being frank, he's had 1 or 2 shitters here and there, but it's going to happen. I trust him more than I trust Chad Green right now, although he has been better the last couple of days. I guess the question I would ask, Aaron Boone is always like Loizaga, and he has always had good stuff, but he's always had a hard on for him, and it really wasn't justified until this season. Considering the relative lack of experience pitching further than the 7th inning, if the Yankees were to make it into a playoff series, how comfortable are you with him pitching in the 8th or 9th over guys who have been there before?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think you got to do it in the regular season. You can't just throw him out there in October. And granted, you got to get to the postseason in the first place. And I think putting him in an 8th or 9th inning role in the postseason right now is what you need to do to win. So that's where I believe Loizaga is better in those innings. You mentioned him being one of the best relievers on the ball club this year. Why not put him out there in the highest pressured situations on a nightly basis? Don't bring him out there in the 7th when everything's free and easy and you can protect the lead for someone else to blow it later. I mean, you should go in there and have a nice spot to where if you're getting 7 innings out of work, go and put Loizaga in the ball game. Maybe you get to Chapman then or mix it up a little bit like that. But I think Loizaga is the best reliever in that bullpen.
He has been, at the very least, the most consistent this season. Chad Green has been pretty good for the most part, but his bad games have been the most catastrophic Yankees losses outside of the Angels one that Chapman blew about a month ago. I mean, one of the advantages to having Chapman out the last couple weeks is one, it's easier to catch the other pitchers, and two, it gives you opportunities to use Loizaga or Green in the ninth inning instead, and they've both managed to get a couple of saves here and there, so it's not completely foreign to them to be pitching at the end of the game. Yeah, Chapman came back and did it tonight after Andrew Heaney, of all people, threw 7 one-run innings against the Red Sox, and then Britton seemed to get a little bit of confidence back, throwing a very nice 1, 2, 3 eighth inning. Hopefully, a step in the right direction for him. But right now, it's kind of a similar thing for the Yankees that it is to the White Sox. Is getting these guys who have been injured or on the COVID list back into a rhythm before September and before possible playoff games in October. So if they're able to do that, obviously the bullpen will be a lot more dangerous and effective in a theoretical playoff series. But right now, Loizaga and maybe Green are the only ones who are, you could argue, are at the top of their games.
Yeah, you mentioned the start from Andrew Heaney tonight, and looking at this stat's kind of mind-boggling. But the Yankees starting pitching, or starting pitchers, have an ERA of 2.94 over their last 38 starts. That's a wild statistic there for a Yankees team. That you look at the rotation and you see Garrett Cole, who's missed time. You see Montgomery missing time. Tyone's been fantastic as of late. And you still you have Heaney there, who, if you take Heaney starts out of that equation, that's phenomenal. I mean, that rotation has been insane, and that's doing it without guys like Montgomery, Cole, I mentioned, Herman, and of course Kluber, Severino. You might be able to see some of these players coming back later on in the season that could really impact that rotation. I think the Yankees are in a good spot.
I hope so, man. But I'm still, yeah. We all know I'm the eternal pessimist here, and we've seen the Yankees have some pretty drastic peaks and valleys all season. So I'll believe it's sustainable when I see it. Nothing's guaranteed, but it has definitely been better the last month, maybe 6 weeks since the 4th of July or so. There's no question about that. But still got, yeah. There's a big series against the A's next week. That'll be huge in the wild card race. There's always more division games. There's still 40 games left here, and so there's nothing guaranteed, but it's definitely been a step in the right direction. Starting rotation wise, you mentioned an entire rotation of guys who have been out.
Yeah.
And while I do expect Kluber to come back relatively soon, he's on a rehab assignment. Severino got paused again. So let's just be pleasantly surprised if he ever pitches for us. I'm giving up on that one for this season. But Herman was actually pitching really well his last couple starts before he got hurt. I got to say, I was pretty encouraged by Garrett Cole's first start back. Montgomery was decent. He did enough to keep the Yankees in the game, and they ended up coming back to win the doubleheader. And Loizaga pitched the 7th inning, but really the 9th inning in that game. And after some soft contact and a Tyler Wade error, loaded the bases. He struck out the side. I mean, that might have been the most electric moment of the Yankee season so far, against a big rival who we've struggled against all season, and what I honestly thought was a must-win game. Like, worst case, have to split that doubleheader, and they ended up winning both, which was just a boon. And they ended up sweeping the series, which is obviously amazing. They cannot just kind of coast from there, though. I know they have 4 games against Minnesota next, a team the Yankees have had a lot of success against, but there's no guarantees in this world, and you can't be coming off the emotional high and then take this series a little bit too lightly, because that'll put you right back where you started.
Yeah. Final thoughts here on the Yankees before we get into the Mets. I'm curious what you think about the outfield situation. If you have Stanton, Judge, Gallo all in there at the same time with Luke Voit as a designated hitter now that Rizzo is back, do you feel like that's the right success, or do you still like a Greg Allen type to keep Stanton off his feet?
Well, I honestly like Greg Allen, and I was confused why the Yankees sent him down when he was playing well, and brought up Jonathan Davis instead, and he also just got sent down, by the way. Short version is, since Stanton's been starting to play the field sometimes recently, it gives the Yankees lineup a lot more flexibility, because the Yankees and most American League teams like to rotate guys through the DH spot and give them half days off, but keep their bats in the lineup. And Stanton's been swinging the bat a little bit better since he's been playing the field a little bit. You can play him in left or right. You saw Voigt's comments yesterday. He's clearly angry and wants to play, and I get it. And Voigt's kind of been a forgotten man this season, because up until 2 weeks ago, he'd only played 25, 30 games all year, and they weren't very impactful. But if you want this lineup, quote unquote, full strength right now, still missing Torres and Urshela, of course, but You DH Voit because Rizzo's obviously a much better defensive first baseman. There's no argument there. If you DH Voit, you can put Stanton in left and have Gallo and Judge rotate in center or right, have Gardner play center field sometimes. He can still hold up pretty well defensively, at least. But if you want to maximize the potential of the offense, you got to DH Voit and have the extremely tall outfield, I think, of Stanton, Gallo, and Judge.
Yeah, it's interesting. This team, they have a lot of options, which is a good thing, especially going into a potential race where you're going to need some depth. So I think the Yankees are in a good spot. But let's start getting over to the Mets a little bit. And you look at the Mets right now; they're in third place in the NL East. We haven't talked about them in a while, and they've really fallen. Atlanta has been smoking hot. The Phillies have been playing good baseball. They've fallen off a little bit. They're about 5-5 in their last 10 with a 2-game losing streak. But the Mets are in a weird spot. They continue to lose games. They continue to underwhelm. And I want to read this quote from Steve Cohen on Twitter. This is the Mets owner, and I really want to dive into this just for a little bit. It's hard to understand how professional hitters can be this unproductive. The best teams have a more disciplined approach. The slugging and OPS numbers don't lie. Now, if your owner is taking to Twitter saying something like that, what's your thought process when you read that?
Dude, that's honestly the first thing I wanted to bring up because that is explosive right there. Steve Cohen has been active on Twitter all season. He's been very interactive with the fans and everything. It's really, really interesting to watch or read, I guess. And he's been preaching patience all season, and the Mets for up until the last 3 weeks or so have been comfortably in the division lead. Even though they've been playing relatively mediocre baseball, they were hovering a few games over 500, but that was good enough for a long time with every other team in the NL East below 500 or just right at it. But when that tide finally turned and the Braves and the Phillies have been playing better baseball, the Mets have gone the wrong direction. And it looks like after preaching patience and everything, and before the Mets won tonight, briefly falling under 500, they're exactly 500 at the time of recording. It looks like Steve Cohen finally lost his patience. And considering all the money he spent and all the money he is going to spend, no matter how long he's in charge of the New York Mets, he clearly had some expectations to make the playoffs this season. And considering that they were in a good spot in a terrible division, they were the White Sox before it was cool, except they fucked that up. And now they really don't have a chance. They don't have a realistic chance at getting one of the wild card spots. So if the Mets are going to make the playoffs, they have to come back and win the division. And they have a tough schedule. We mentioned that last week when we discussed them. How likely do you really think it is that they can make up a 4-game deficit?
There's no chance. I'm ruling the Mets out. I'm serious. I truly don't think they can come back. I know DeGrom might come back in September or something like that. That's only 4 starts. That's 4 wins if you count them all as wins. I mean, you do know he doesn't get the win totals that you like when he takes the mound sometimes. So, I mean, you never know with a DeGrom start. But, I mean, this team is so strange because you're waiting for him to click. You're waiting for him to click constantly, and they never do. So they're in a weird spot, but I truly think that I think that they're a team that could – I think they're pretty much done with the way Atlanta's playing. They're hot. They're smoking hot right now. They made some good moves, and he's a good spot there for Atlanta and also Philadelphia.
No, I agree 100% on that one. Now, I don't think the way that the Braves and the Phillies have been playing is 100% guaranteed or sustainable for the rest of this season, considering how inconsistent they've been in the 3 quarters of the season so far. And I know we've seen the Phillies slightly come back to earth a little after that 8-game winning streak. We knew that wasn't going to last forever. I got to say, I'm really, really impressed with the Braves in particular, especially after losing Ronald Acuna to a very serious injury that's going to keep him out the rest of this season, possibly some of next year as well. He's their best player. He's the face, the energy of that team. And the Braves they have not let that derail their season that wasn't going all that well when he was playing. They've actually improved in his absence. And that's got to be a fantastic boon for them in the clubhouse and obviously in the standings as well, where they've taken the NL East lead. So you gotta respect them. Freddie Freeman just hit for the cycle for the 2nd time this season tonight. I know that's kind of arbitrary, but it does show how much talent is still on that roster. the Mets still have a talented team, but offensively, outside of maybe you could argue for Nimmo and Alonso, the rest of these bigger bats in the lineup are underperforming a bit. You've got some guys, to quote Steve Cohen back at him, with some shitty OPSs. And while I don't think that's the whole story, it's definitely a part of it, because you have a pretty balanced Mets lineup that is built to hit a decent amount of home runs. And for the most part, that just isn't happening enough. And the pitching staff has been a strength of this team for years, and including the first half of this season, but it has not been the same since the All-Star break. And DeGrom being out, obviously a big factor. Taiwan Walker hasn't been quite as good until his most recent start since the All-Star break. Stroman was good in his last start, but he doesn't usually pitch very deep into games, and other than his last start, and they still lost it. David Peterson's probably out for the season. So, and Rich Hill, it really hasn't been much of a factor since he's been acquired. So that Mets pitching staff that was elite, maybe the best one in the game overall for most of the season, has been one of the worst. And it doesn't take a genius to see why they've slipped so much in the standings and why they're struggling right now.
Yeah, Mets fans hope that they don't continue to fall, but it's not looking good for the Mets so far. So that's going to do it for today. I appreciate everyone that tuned in. Once again, be sure to check us out on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a review, comment. We'll pop up some comments on the videos sometimes if you leave them below. But that's going to do it for today. And for Swig, I'm Dylan Kearns with the Big City Sports Podcast. We'll see you next time.